You are eligible for a certificate of attendance for today's training if you're attending live. At the very end of today's training, we'll put a survey into the chat. You'll be able to use that to fill out both an evaluation about today's training and give us some ideas about other things you might want to hear about, as well as putting your information in, and you'll get a certificate emailed to you in about a week. The slides will be available as well. You'll get another email that has the slides as well as some handouts. We'll put some handouts in a little bit later on. We are using Zoom today. You're welcome to use the chat. I hope that you do. I like to see where people are attending from. I also like to see, if you've got questions or comments, please put them in the chat. If you want to ask a question anonymously, we do have the Q&A turned on, so you can use that as well. You'll find that in the Zoom ribbon. As you'll also find, if you need it closed captioning, it's available in the ribbon. It does a pretty good job of keeping up with me. And the last thing for housekeeping is that we will be using Mentimeter today. So I'm going to go to this next slide that has the instructions on. We'll turn my camera off so you can grab that. If you've got a smartphone, you can use the QR code and scan that. If you are using menti.com with the browser window, you can enter that 8-digit code. If for whatever reason you get distracted or kicked off at any point, the menti.com website as well as the code will be on every single slide as we go through. If you're familiar with using Menti, it's kind of fun. It's also anonymous. You get to put your information in. I don't know who said anything. It's anonymous, but it is a way for you to interact with me and for me to get your feedback as we go through. So we'll give you another couple of seconds. If you have joined, go ahead and give a thumbs up in on the Menti screen, and that lets me know that a few of you have managed to join. Like I said, that website and the code will be on every slide, so we will move on. Hopefully, I'll remember to mention that as we go along. All right, what are we going to learn today? So I like to put out what we're going to learn today so you have an idea of where we're at. We're going to learn what a learning objective is and why you should write them down. We're also going to learn how to write an effective learning objective and how to decide what kinds of resources might be helpful for whatever training that you are doing. So where do you start? So starting at the beginning, you want to really drill down to what it is that you want people to learn. And the best way to determine that is writing it down. What is the goal of your training? What are we trying to accomplish today? So the writing down what those learning objectives are going to be, what specific things do you want people to take away from your training? To start with, for today's training, I want to hear what your perspectives are on what a learning objective is. So this is one of the Menti questions. You're able to type in the answer for this one. If you're joining on your phone, you can type it in on your phone. If you're joining on a browser window, you can type it in there. If you're just joining us, the menti.com website is at the top, as well as that 8-digit code. You can enter that and join us for this Menti session. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think a learning objective is? Because this is an important piece when you are planning your training. If you've got your learning objectives down, it's going to make the rest of your training a lot easier to plan out. Are you guys shy? There we go. Well, now we're starting to get some. What people should understand or experience by the end of your training. Yes, that's perfect. The thing that you want people to walk away with, the main point, a main objective, an outline, that's a great way of looking at it. A goal for a skill that the trainee should take away from your training. The mission, what is the mission of this training? That's a great way. A goal, what do you want people to take away? What do you want people to learn? These are all great. Those are all great ideas. And yes, we are on the right track. So this is one of those methods of I ask you some questions about what we're talking about today. And this is a way for me to assess what do you guys already know? Because when we're talking about adult learners, people already have experience in the workplace. You have experience with training. I know all of you do. Many of you both giving training and receiving training. So it's important to assess what do people already know. So if you want a specific outcome, you need specific goals. So if you decided that you wanted to train for a marathon, and you decided that to train for that marathon, you were going to join Old Timers Hockey and you were going to play twice a week, that would be better than sitting on the couch for the entire duration of your training time, but it probably isn't as effective as, following a marathon running training program, right? So if you want a specific outcome, you need to have specific goals as you're trying to train folks. So learning objectives, they can help you organize your thoughts a little bit and organize your training. They also are going to make your training more effective because you're going to have an idea of what are the goals of this training? What are the things that I want to accomplish with it? The other piece is that they're going to help you identify some gaps in training, both as you are planning your training, but then also as you're delivering your training. You get to have a chance to assess as you go along. So a learning objective, this is going to convey how a student is going to be different after the training. How is the training going to change them? Are they going to learn a new skill? Are they going to get new knowledge that they didn't have before? Or are they going to learn a new behavior? It also is going to convey how and when success is going to be measured. How do we determine whether somebody is done learning this? How when they have accomplished the training and they're good now? Or is it something that maybe has partial success as you go through? It also is then going to convey any specific conditions that will apply. If your training objective is real broad, like I'm going to teach you how to drive, does that mean that they're learning how to drive a go-kart or a forklift or a excavator or a truck? Like what are they learning how to drive? Having those specific conditions when you are writing your learning objectives is really important. So what is different? What's different after this training? Are they learning knowledge? Knowledge is usually the easiest thing to teach people. It might be something like explaining updates to a manual, something like that. Skill is usually another common one that people are being taught. It could be operating a forklift, but it could be a skill like using a piece of software too. It doesn't have to be necessarily a physical skill. It could be a mental skill. And then usually the toughest one for people to train and for trainees to get is behavior. So a lot of times that might be adopting a new safety standard, but it could also be something like we've completely changed how we submit expense reports. And so you're going to have to adopt a new behavior. The reason that behavior can often be more difficult is because oftentimes we already have an established behavior. So we're trying to, people have habits that they've already kind of gotten in a rhythm with, and we're trying to change those habits. And that is difficult because people want to slide back into what they know and what they're used to. Okay. So how do we write a good learning objective? When I first started here at Michigan Tech at the Center for Technology and Training, I had done a lot of training, but most of it was one-on-one training or maybe a small group. I hadn't done training for a larger group. And so, where do you start? How do you plan this out? And that was where Pete had talked about using these learning objectives. We kind of walked through. We got some good resources for you guys today for this as well. We can drop those. I'd say drop those into the chat before we get started. Going through what makes a good learning objective. So many of you might be familiar with SMART goals, the acronym SMART. So SMART means specific, it means measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely or timeline. Sometimes people say the timely instead of timeline, but we went with timeline for today. So if you've ever heard of those SMART goals, this is a way to make sure that like a goal, or in this case, a learning objective, is applicable to people. You want to make sure that as an adult learner, it's a lot harder to learn something that you can't use in your day-to-day life, or that you're not going to use because people have limited time, right? It feels like a waste of their time if they're being taught something that they're never going to use. So this is partially why we chose today to focus on these learning objectives, because I know that this is something that you can take back to your existing trainings and tweak existing trainings, or if you are planning new trainings, incorporate right from the beginning. But you need to be able to choose a specific skill, specific knowledge, or specific behavior that you want your learners to come away with from that training. The more specific that you are with it, the better, because the easier it's going to be then to decide whether did they achieve this, because you're going to have a measurable goal for them. And to make that measurable goal measurable, like did they accomplish it or not, you also have to think about whether it's going to be achievable for them. So we're going to go through these. So in terms of our specific goals, we want to break something big into smaller tasks. So when we talk about learning objectives, it's okay if in your training, it might not even be a very long training. If you have, 10, 12, 20 learning objectives, you don't want to limit yourself on these learning objectives, because it isn't that necessarily that you will teach them in a linear fashion where you start with learning objective 1 and you move along through them. Like if we think about at the very beginning, we talked about what is a learning objective and why should you write them down. Hopefully you're getting a little bit of that as we go through here. It's okay to have a lot of them, because the more specific you are, the easier it's going to be to evaluate if people are being successful in their learning. Something specific, instead of saying that you're going to teach somebody how to drive a snowplow, maybe we say by the end of the training, they're going to be able to navigate a specific course of snow cones or road cones for a mock snow event, or maybe they're going to be able to explain what range of speed is appropriate for plowing snow, something that's very specific. So what is a specific skill, task, piece of information, behavior that you teach right now, something that you are currently trying to train people to do? And I think also sometimes we focus on training that is more formal, like somebody standing up in front of a group of people and teaching. But there's also a lot of less formal training that happens. One-on-one training, maybe a coworker asks you, hey, how do you do this? And you walk over to them and you show them how to do this. Those are also training opportunities, and having some of this thought behind even those tasks can be helpful. So what are some specific things that you guys are training or are planning to do training on? Asset management. What else? Construction inspection experience for new hires. Yes. And that's something as well with new hires, is that, new hires, oftentimes we think of new hires being a young person, but new hires doesn't necessarily mean a young person, especially in our job market currently. It might mean somebody who is transitioning from another career into public works. So they might bring some experience, and maybe good and bad habits to that job. How to operate equipment for performing road maintenance, driving a road grader. Yeah. All right. Filling out a permit. That's a very specific task. Heavy equipment. That's a much more broad task. Maybe we can get a little bit more specific with that one. Drafting standards. How to set up tables and graphs in Excel. CAD software. Which is it CAD just in general, or is it a specific software type? Because that is definitely something I learned to draft in college a billion years ago using AutoCAD. And then when I went to work, I had to use MicroStation, if you're familiar with them. I don't recommend doing it in that order. There's a lot of things that are different they're both CAD softwares, but there's a lot of things that are different. And I was very frustrated about why I could not do some of the things that I was used to being able to do in AutoCAD the exact same way when I went to MicroStation. Chain of command, that is a behavior one that is a kind of a difficult one to try and change. Who to go to for what, and also when to go to people for things, and when to, maybe this is a problem that you solve yourself, maybe this is a problem that you escalate up the chain. How to budget CIP projects. Yeah, these are all good things. Like with the heavy equipment one, if you think about that one in terms of a more specific one. Pete, do you have any comments with any of our specific tasks here?
Yeah, so for heavy equipment, you might get more specific on how to navigate a forklift in our building without crashing into things. Something you can keep it really, really basic, and you can build on that. Say, now let's operate that forklift and do this specific task, lifting this pallet of paint buckets and moving them across the shop and without spilling them, and doing it in 5 minutes or something like that. You can add more criteria to help build more of a check for the person who's training to have an idea of what kind of goal you're shooting for.
Yes, excellent. All right, let's go on to our next. That leads perfectly into our next slide, which is, so this first one was specific. This next one for SMART is measurable. How are we determining whether something is a success? Does the person have to be perfect? Because sometimes that is the requirement. You have to be perfect for this. Sometimes not though. Sometimes there's some some wiggle room. Maybe it is that you are better than how you were performing in the past. And maybe sometimes it's something like you are you have a 80% success rate. How do we know when we're done training if we don't have some way to measure whether or not somebody has learned this? Because the other piece of training is that often we do a training and there's no follow-up afterwards. We have done some training and then we kind of walked away from things. So the other piece of this is that when we are trying to create a measurable learning objective, the enemy of measurable is the word understand. When you're writing out a learning objective, when you start off doing these, it will be very, very tempting to use the word understand. The student will understand something, how to write a learning objective. I don't want you to understand how to write a learning objective. I want you to write a learning objective. That understanding is kind of an amorphous, vague idea of what, it's not a measurable thing. I can't really measure, did you understand or not, unless I'm asking you to do the thing. There's a lot of really good words. One of the resources that we have is a big giant list of action verbs. And I really encourage you to take those action verbs and try to use those every time you are tempted to use the word understand. I guarantee you that there is a more descriptive, better word that you can use. So that list of action verbs is kind of like a cheat sheet thesaurus for avoiding using the word understand. All right, measurable continued. So like I said, those word choices matter. Using explain is a much better word. Can you explain to me? Because understand, I don't know whether you do or not, but if you can successfully explain the idea behind something, especially when it comes to like behaviors, can you explain to me why we are implementing this new safety rule? Can you demonstrate a new skill? You know, that understanding is really, really difficult. It's much easier to use a different word. The other piece of that, like I have here on the slide, is that it gives you a chance to correct those misunderstandings. If you just ask somebody, do you understand? They can say, yep. And you don't even realize that, oh no, they did not learn this at all. They have a much different understanding of what we just talked about than what I intended for them to have. All right, so this is a multiple choice question for you. How do you guys gauge whether a learner has learned the content? Do you just go by their job performance after the training? Is it a written test that they have to take, or maybe a verbal test? They've got to talk it over with somebody. Are they demonstrating the skill or knowledge to you before you say, yep, you learned it, or do you have no formal assessment? This is kind of what I was guessing our answers would be. A lot of demonstrating the skill, and maybe some no formal assessment. I think the other piece when we're talking about demonstrating a skill is that sometimes when we ask folks to demonstrate a skill, we've asked them to demonstrate it when we are doing these learning objectives. Do your learning objectives have some flexibility to them? And what I mean by that is that if you ask someone to perform a specific skill, they might understand how to do that in a vacuum. But if any piece of the puzzle changes, do they still understand how to do that task? So maybe you've asked them to submit an expense report. They went to a store, they bought, a widget, and they came back and they submit their receipt, and they're getting reimbursed for that. Okay, they know how to do that, but do they know, like, if they were to go on a trip and they had maybe a gas receipt or a hotel receipt, do they know how to submit something like that might have a different breakdown? Those types of things are important to have a well-rounded learner So you want to make sure that when you are talking about things, don't necessarily need to go into detail about every possible scenario that they might encounter, but you do want to say, all right, so you know how to drive a forklift, maybe that is carrying something that is not paint buckets, that is something that doesn't have liquid. That is a different skill, slightly different skill than hauling around something that is sloshing around. So do they understand enough about this? Do they have the basics down? All right, so with our SMART, we had specific, we had measurable, now we have achievable. So you want to consider maybe modules for a complex or extensive topic so that people have the topic broken down into achievable pieces. That way you can build some success, build some confidence, and you also get the chance to correct any issues that you might have along the way, as opposed to getting to the very end of your training and realizing, oh geez, they didn't understand something at the day one, hour one, they didn't get it, and we've been training for a week now. It gives you a chance to do that intermittent testing and get that ability to kind of check in with your folks. The other piece that can be really helpful with building blocks is that if you've got a staff where you've got kind of stratified, you've got people with a lot of experience, and then you've got really new employees, those building blocks can take advantage of some of that experience. You can have some of your senior staff be teaching the new people the beginning basic stuff, which helps keep them from being bored. Like I talked about it a little bit ago. If you have adult learners, people get bored easy if it is something that is not applicable to them. And if it is something that you already know, it can be really easy to kind of check out and not be engaged. So we've got specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. So adult learners are going to lose motivation if it isn't applicable to them. Why are they learning this? You need to be able to convey the reason behind why you're teaching it to them. How is it going to benefit them? What do they need? What do you want to teach, which is an important piece. Sometimes we want to over explain things, and that isn't always what people need. They need a certain amount of information, and then there's more stuff. That is why this is a 1 hour lunch and learn. So I mean, you can go to school and get a PhD in education. That is there's a lot of like science and study behind this concept. We're not getting into that. I'm not citing a whole bunch of sources because you don't care. That is not what you need to know. That is just nice to know information. All right, so how do you guys show that your training is relevant to your trainees? What are some of the things that you tell them why they are sitting in a training, or why you are sending them to a training maybe? How do you show that is a relevant piece? Like I said, we've got specific, we've got measurable, achievable, and now we're talking about the relevance of a particular training. Sharing real world examples, that's a great way to convey that it is relevant. Giving examples of projects where things have gone wrong. Yes, that can be one of the most important ways to show relevance. Is I have said this to young engineers: learn from my mistakes so you don't have to make the same mistake. Examples in videos, showing examples of different things. Yeah, different topics. Personal experiences, how maybe a training helped you, or maybe why not having that training hurt you, both maybe physically hurt you, or maybe just career-wise hurt you. What are some other ones? Pete, do you have some examples maybe of how you've shown that training is relevant to folks?
So like for a training that you're going to actually learn to do something, and it's a job skill that you have to do to make your job perform better. Like say something simple like digging a trench. Like if you can do it a certain way, you put the dirt in a certain spot where you don't have to move it again. That helps you save on the work effort that you put into moving that dirt. Now you only have to move it once. You only have to move it 2-3 times. So little things like that, kind of showing where it can maybe help them, so that maybe they don't have to work as hard, or maybe they're safer too at their job.
Yeah. Yeah, and some trainings, the reason that it is relevant to folks is because you have to do this so that we can continue to employ you. Sometimes there are some of you I know who might have a probationary CDL program where somebody can be hired without a CDL or maybe with a lower class CDL. And in order to continue to work there, you've got to get your class A, or maybe you need some endorsements or something in order to continue to work there. Some of the other trainings you might need to have in order to be promoted. You might need to go to a certain training for leadership. OSHA, yes, there's lots of OSHA required trainings that are important for your guys's industry. All right, any others that we can think of that are, discuss how specific things fit into being compliant. Yes, yeah, that is a huge piece of this. Sometimes it might not make as much sense about why are we doing something this way, and sometimes it's because there is a legal obligation or a funding obligation to do this work in this particular way. That's one for our PASER training. We start off with, why do you have to do PASER training? Because it's the law. They have said that you must. All right, thanks, Pete. And then our last piece of the SMART goal is timeline. So you need to have some type of timing in your learning objective. So it needs to be specific, it needs to be measurable, achievable, relevant to the person, and then you have to give them some timeline for when they are going to achieve it. So sometimes, depending on the complexity of the task, it might be by the end of the training, you're going to be able to do this. That's my hope with the learning objectives, is that by the end of the training, you're going to be able to write a learning objective. Maybe though it's something that they're going to have to practice a little bit. So maybe by the 10th time they execute that particular skill, maybe by the end of a probationary period. So they have a specific amount of time to be able to practice, and then there is a test. You want to make sure that you're matching the complexity to the timeline. And this is another place where breaking a really big task into small modules is helpful, because that builds a little bit of confidence. It lets you check in, but it also gives a reasonable timeline, especially if it is something that is self-paced for people. It is really easy for a lot of other things to get in the way if you don't have some of those deadlines intermittently throughout the period. All right, so this is another multiple choice question. This one is, how quickly do you guys expect your learners to master a new skill? When you're doing a training, is it usually things where you are training and expecting them to get it immediately afterwards? Or is it something where there is a predetermined amount of time? Maybe you got a week or a month or the duration of their probationary period, or you don't really have a set time that new skills have to be learned by. Okay, this is also kind of what I was expecting with things. And this is one of the other issues that a lot of times we have with training, is that we have people do a training and then, okay, we don't often check in again afterwards to determine, like, did they learn this? And that can solve a lot of problems, because sometimes folks will be doing something wrong, not knowing that they're doing it wrong. There isn't like a malicious thing. They missed a key piece of whatever the training was, and they are just blissfully going along thinking that they're doing things right, and they are not. So having that, having some type of time limit for you to check in and see, did they learn this? Are there any issues? Is there anything that we can help and correct on? All right, and then for most of you with that predetermined amount of time, I would encourage you to go back and look, do you have any interim steps for them to accomplish within that time period, or any check-ins that you're doing? Because those, again, can be really helpful. All right, so here is where we get to have a little bit more fun. Let's practice. Let's write some learning objectives from a training that you guys are doing at your agency. So remember, we're trying to make them specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and some type of timeline to it. Whether it's by the end of the class, by the end of their probationary period, you should be able to type these in. We'll give you a few minutes here to write these ones in. And I will say that with our learning objectives, take a stab at this, right? And then Pete and I will talk about some of them. Again, it's anonymous, so I can't tell who wrote which learning objectives. So don't worry about like, oh no, I did it wrong. The goal here is for you guys to write some learning objectives, and then we can do a little bit of critique. And this is something that I really, really encourage you guys to do, is to write learning objectives and then give them to somebody else and ask them what they think about them. Do they meet the SMART goal concept? Are they specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely? Pete and I do this all the time. I will write learning objectives, take a first stab at it, and then send it to him, and he'll tweak them a little bit, and vice versa. It is so much easier to write them out and then have someone look at them and do a little bit of tweaking. The first stab at them is usually a little bit rough. So no worries here if you've got ones that are maybe need a little bit of work. That's the whole point. That is why we are training. And this also gives me a chance to see, like, are you guys picking up some of what we are talking about today? And if you're not in the Mentimeter, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can add it to the QA if you are feeling shy. We'll get them either way. All right, so we've got our first one here. Input capital improvement projects, splitting costs per fund for the next 5 years in the program in use by December 13th. All right, so let's think about this one. What do we think, Pete? Have we gotten specific?
Very specific.
Very specific, which is good. That's what we like. Is it measurable?
Definitely.
All right. Does it seem achievable?
Not knowing all the data that they're putting in just on face value, it definitely looks like it's something that's achievable.
Yes.
We have a timeline we're shooting for. Yeah.
That one looks good. How about this next one? We've got basic knowledge of operations and safety of the equipment they are training on, if they have the motor skills and comprehension to operate the equipment. All right. So I would say for that one, we might want to drill down even deeper on what does basic knowledge mean? What else do you think, Pete?
Maybe some kind of deadline or something that's measurable too. So when you're saying basic knowledge, like you mentioned, what kind of knowledge are we talking about? Just what the pieces of the equipment are, what they're called, different parts, what they're called, that kind of basic knowledge, or basic knowledge like how to make the machine move, how to make those pieces and parts of that machine operate in the way they're supposed to. So you can add a little bit more detail into that. And it doesn't always have to be like how to operate a motor grader. It's how to operate the wing, how to bring the board up and down, how to make it go forward and reverse, those kind of things. I'll make it a little bit more measurable. It may sound silly, like, yeah, they should know how to do that, but in reality, if it's a new skill, we always have to start at the basics.
Yeah.
So.
And then building off of that, you can then build onto things like achieving a specific outcome. So maybe you want them to be able to grade a gravel road at a specific percentage, something like that. That again would be a really specific goal, and maybe that is at the end of the training. If you got a lengthy training, by the end of this, they'll be able to do that. They start off with the very basics. What are some other ones here? Utilize the asset management software for our culvert inventory program. So I think we could get more specific with that one. Utilize it to do what? What are we trying to achieve with it? Are we utilizing it to generate work orders? Are we using it to map where our assets are? Are we using it to create a program to figure out where to do repairs on these? What are we doing with that?
Are we inputting data? Are we analyzing data?
Yes.
Are we making reports based off the data? There could be other things we can drill down into that one.
Yeah. After 1 week, all leave eligible employees will be able to input leave time into timekeeping software. That seems like an excellent one. I like that one. We've got a timeline. We've got something that seems very achievable for folks, and it is for specific people. I like this. What else? Complete an inspector daily report in accordance with departmental guidelines. Okay. I think that one is good. I think we could maybe make it a little bit more specific. With that, are we what are the different parts of that daily report? And what type of inspection are we doing too, maybe?
Yeah, you can also add how fast they can input it, like if it's something that has to be done every day and the contractor has to agree with the quantities that you're submitting to. So there is a timeline built in.
Yep.
So having the ability to get all your measurables and input it on the daily report. So definitely you can add more into that, but it's pretty specific because departmental guidelines, there's probably a list of things that have to be followed. So maybe listing those out might help too.
Yeah, and these can always be something where maybe you have some bullet points underneath it. The next one would maybe a great example of that. The GAIN computerized office technician certification within 12 months of hire. That's something that I could understand might be a very common thing for you guys. Maybe having some of those skills listed out beneath there, or maybe some of the other issues that a person might have for that.
And that one is based, if I'm understanding it correctly, that's based off of taking the MDOT class.
Mhm.
So that's something where if you don't pass the class, you're not gonna get certification.
Right.
So there is a real specific measurable there and
Yep.
have a specific timeline as well. Maybe you can add something, how they can work towards that,
Mhm.
like maybe work with a senior level technician and to start to learn some of these things ahead of time before they take the class might help.
Yep, to be a little bit familiar with things. The other piece is that this isn't maybe one of those, but some of the certification programs maybe are only offered once per year. So having some idea of when that is going to be offered, so people have a chance, like Pete said, to prepare a little bit. Be able to draw 3D projects, even more complex projects within 6 months to a year. I think having maybe some examples of what those 3D projects are, or some breakdown with that. Are we talking about a building? Are we talking about a utility system? What are we talking in terms of those 3D projects? 60 days to certify for operator by demonstrating operational skills in motor grader, along with consistent improvement during those 60 days. All right, that one doesn't sound too bad. I think that is a good maybe like heading for a list of smaller objectives. Like I said, taking that one, that's a pretty big objective. It's very well written, but it also is broad.
Yeah, the certification, there must be something that goes along with that at your agency that makes it so they are certified. They're able to operate the equipment in the motor grader in a specific way in a specific setting. Obviously, on roads is probably what we're
Most likely.
in traffic most likely too.
Yeah. Yes. So that is a great one. Breaking it down, like I said, maybe having some sub goals beneath it could be really helpful. But these are great. Awesome job, everybody. Especially for a first try. All right, so let's talk about learning styles a little bit. So you may have heard of learning styles like I learn best by watching a video, or I learn best by reading a book, something like that. I learn best by working alone. I'm an engineer. I've heard that one many times while I was in school. I may have even said that one a few times. But the actual best way to measure, like, what is the best way for someone to learn is not necessarily the way that somebody prefers to learn. So this is the learning style is kind of a myth, because it isn't necessarily how that person is going to absorb the information best. It's what they prefer doing. And so this is why I say it's a little bit like eating your vegetables, right? There are some examples of some things where how you might prefer to learn may not be the best way for you to actually learn how to do that skill or absorb that knowledge. Sometimes you're going to have to eat your vegetables. So if we take the example of learning how to cook, right? Not everybody's born, you have to learn to cook at some point in your life. Hopefully you have at least some basic skills. But there are lots of ways to learn how to do that. So this one is another multiple choice. What do you think is going to be the most helpful if somebody is going to attempt a new recipe? If they were to watch a video demonstration, if they have a one-on-one like session, help from an expert, a chef is going to help them. If they watch a live demonstration from somebody who knows how to make this recipe, if they have the expert walk you through the steps over the phone, So if you are unfamiliar, Butterball Turkey has the Butterball Turkey hotline that you can call them, and they will tell you how to cook your turkey if you are lost. So this is an actual thing. You can have an expert with you walk you through steps over the phone. And then the last one is reading the recipe, but the recipe doesn't have any pictures at all. It's just words. What do you think is going to be the most helpful for people? Nobody is picking the Butterball Turkey hotline. Nobody likes that one. Most of you are saying having one-on-one help from an expert. A few folks have said reading the recipe, no pictures. I think that there definitely can be some benefit to reading a recipe, because with a recipe, you have something to go refer back to, right? If you have one-on-one help with an expert, you might be able to make it through this process of making this recipe with them there, but then the next time that you go to do it, you might not remember all of the steps, and without something to refer back to, that might be difficult, right? A video demonstration is really nice because you can pause, you can rewind, and you can do it as many times as you want, which with one-on-one help from an expert, there is a limit to how many times you can ask them to repeat themselves before they will get angry at you, even the kindest person eventually. But with a video demonstration, you can rewind and watch that over and over and over and over and over again until you get it. So with this recipe, there are some things that are going to impact which one of those you chose. So what might contribute to your ability to master that new recipe? Whether or not you chose one of those options or another, because there are pros and cons to all of them. You know, some of them you have the ability to refer back to it. Some of them you have that expert right there with you. Repetitiveness. Yes. Is this a recipe that you only have to make once? In that case, I might go for the expert help. It might also asking questions. Yeah, if you have a bunch of questions with this, good descriptions. Yeah, how well is that written recipe written? It doesn't have any pictures, but is it really descriptive? My talent or lack thereof as a cook. Yes. The written instructions might work really well for somebody who's an experienced cook, but if you have never made anything, you might be like, I don't know how to fold in cheese. I am confused. What does that mean? Yeah, what your experience is. Do you have somebody who can help you adapt the ingredients if things are off a little bit? Having what your previous knowledge is, what things should look like. Yeah, what is your experience? Yeah, do you know what the final product is supposed to look like? Do you have an idea of where we're going with this, or is this all completely new to you? What else? What are some other things, Pete?
Yeah, so to add on to the previous one, or to kind of explain a little bit more, so reading the recipe was a few people that had chosen that. But that goes along with having the previous knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you said, if you don't know what whipping eggs are or dressing the turkey.
Yeah.
I'm picturing Amelia Bedelia.
Yes.
Putting the clothes on the turkey.
Yep.
If you don't know those things, reading the recipe might not help you at all.
Yeah.
So you'll need that video or some kind of visual thing to really help you. But if you have all that knowledge ahead of time, reading the recipe is the go-to, because you already understand it. You can refer back to it really quickly. Yeah, that's my only thoughts, I guess, I had on that.
Yeah, I think one of the other pieces here is that what's the level of pressure here for completing this recipe? Are we it's Tuesday and we're making something new just for the heck of it? Or is this like my boss is coming to dinner and I have to impress them? Or like I'm meeting my future in-laws and I need this meal to go really well. What kind of pressure do we have for things? How complex is that recipe? All those types of things. The other piece is maybe what equipment do we have available to us? That might also make a difference in terms of, like I've cooked a turkey several times. I've never deep fried a turkey. So I might call the Butterball line and be like, hey, tips. Those types of things might be part of this. All right. So another way to look at this is driver's education. So there is a classroom portion to that, and then there's a hands-on portion to that. If you only did one of them and not the other, there is going to be some missing information for you, right? If you only did the classroom portion and you never did any hands-on, and then you went to try and take the test, there is, especially vehicle to vehicle, there are some nuances to, like, where is the turn signal on this vehicle? How do I turn lights on or off? How do I turn windshield wipers on and off? How touchy are the brakes? How touchy is the gas pedal? If you've only done the hands-on portion, you might be like, I don't know what that sign means, or I have come to a traffic circle and I have absolutely no idea what these pavement markings mean or what I am supposed to do. So neither one of those pieces is going to be as effective individually as they are when you combine both of them. And that is something to really think about as well. If you're asking people to learn a new skill, you have to give them some ability to practice that skill before you evaluate whether or not they learned something. When we talk about resources, this can be really helpful. So those resources for the cooking example, like we said, the recipe is a really good resource if you know how to cook. If you don't, a video might be a better resource. The best resources might be both. So that is partially why we have recorded this class, and we're going to make it available to you afterwards. We also are giving you the action verb handout, as well as another handout about learning objectives and writing them, because maybe you don't want to listen to this entire video again. Maybe you want to just scan through that document. So what is going to be the most useful depending on the task that you're doing? So if it is an infrequent task, the most helpful thing is going to be, where do you need to go to find help? So if it's something like right now it's open enrollment time, so you only do that once a year, where do you go to figure out how to do the open enrollment? I don't need to go to a video about that every month. I just need to know that when I need to know that. I need an email sent to me with where that video is, that I can do it at my leisure. The more infrequent something is going to be, the more detailed you want those handouts and resources to be. Something that I really recommend for people is that it's very easy to screen record your computer or your phone screen for a really quick and easy supplement. And it does not have to be like perfect professional grade quality, right? You can open a Zoom or a Teams meeting, you can hit record, share your screen, do what you need to do. If you have a microphone, you can also do a voiceover right then. And if you stumble a little bit, that's okay. But that can be a really helpful thing for people. The same thing on your phone. You can do a screen record on your phone, and it will ask you, at least on iPhones, I believe, I assume that Androids have the same ability. It will ask you whether you want to engage your microphone, so you can do a voiceover again as you walk through steps, maybe using an app or something on your phone. Those can be really helpful, and I think people sometimes shy away from them because they aren't going to be perfect. You're probably going to stumble over your words a little bit, or maybe you're going to finger fumble and not go to the exact right thing perfectly every time. That's okay. It's still going to be a really helpful resource, and I recommend that people do that. For more frequent tasks, you don't need as detailed of handouts because people are going to be doing them very often. But what can be an issue is that when we are doing really frequent tasks, a lot of times we forget to check in. Do people know how to do this? We assume that they do because they are doing them, but are they doing them correctly? And the other piece is that when we have something that we do really frequently, if you then need to change that, it's much more difficult because people are kind of entrenched in the way that they do things. So that can be a bigger challenge, and you might need to put a little bit more effort and maybe more check-ins as people are adopting a new method or new software or new strategy, new safety rules, whatever it might be. This is a big piece here. Continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. That's a Mark Twain quote. I really like that one. When it comes to this training, I've thrown a lot of information at you today. I don't want you to feel like you have to implement all of this at once or revamp all of your training at once. Going through and taking one training and looking at, do I have learning objectives? Are there things in this that I could trim because they're nice to know as opposed to need to know? Are there ways to make this training more measurable? Are there ways to make it more achievable for folks? Are people actually achieving the goal of this training? Those are all things that you can do without a ton of effort. And then once you kind of identified some of those things, then you can start to go in and maybe write some learning objectives for that training and start to chip away at them, how to make this training a little bit better. I don't want you to feel like you have to revamp the whole world all at once. Small changes, once you start making them, they tend to grow and build off of one another. And That is what we're after. Like small changes over time are going to grow into something a lot larger. So that is we are at the end. If anybody has some other learning objectives that you would like to maybe put into the slides, I can go back and we can take a look at those, and Pete and I can maybe help you out with those. But we are at the very end. We do have some resources for you that Pete's dropped in the chat. Again, those will be ready for you at the very end of the training. We will put in the SurveyMonkey link. We can do that now, give folks a chance to get that in. The SurveyMonkey link, it has both the evaluation as well as your certificate for attendance. So if you go all the way to the end, you'll get that. We'll email that out to you. We'll also email the link to this recording, as well as link to these resources for you. So I hope that this was helpful. If there are other things that you would like to hear about, let us know, and we will try and accommodate that. If there are, other training things that you would like us to do more of a deep dive into, we can also look at trying to do something like that. But other than that, I really appreciate you guys tuning in today. We will stick around here for a little bit, and that way you get to do the evaluation. If you want to, again, if you want to put anything into the chat or put some learning objectives in here, we'll take a look at them and we can help you out maybe. But thank you. We are doing some other training. We've got one for people skills that I'm doing with our new hire, Lori, tomorrow. That one we also are going to repeat in December. We're going to repeat this one again in December. So if you've got coworkers, they're like, oh, they should see this too, there's still a chance for them to take this one. And then there's also effective meetings that we will be repeating 2 more times as well. So again, thank you all for attending. We'll hang out for a little bit, and we'll hope to see you next time. All right, folks, we'll give you till the top of the hour here, and then we're going to close the room. So make sure you've grabbed that SurveyMonkey link so that you can get your certificate of attendance. And then once you've done that, if you don't have any problems filling it out, you are free to go. Again, thank you for attending today, and we'll see you next time.